You are not soft anymore. You are not fragile anymore. And you are not here to be consumed. If that sentence creates a strange mix of relief and resistance in your chest, stay with me. Because what you are becoming is not what the world taught you an empath is supposed to be. A broken empath is not someone who lost their heart. They are someone who finally learned how to protect it. And the reason they are the last person anyone should underestimate is because they have already survived what destroys most people. In the next 2 minutes, I am going to name the hidden strength most empaths never realize they are carrying. Why your sensitivity was never the weakness they made you believe it was, and the one shift that turns emotional overwhelm into emotional authority. Halfway through, I will give you one grounding practice that rewires your nervous system from survival scanning into self-trust. And by the end, you will understand why the version of you that was called too sensitive, too emotional, too much, is actually the most dangerous person in the room once they stop abandoning themselves. A broken empath is not broken. They are recalibrating. There is a lie that follows sensitive people from childhood into adulthood. The lie says your pain means you are weak. The lie says your tears mean you cannot lead. The lie says your heart makes you vulnerable to being controlled. The lie says strength looks like hardness, but that is not how nervous systems work. And that is not how power is built. Most people who call themselves empaths are not describing a personality trait. They are describing a survival role. They learned to read rooms before they learned to read books. They learned to track emotional shifts before they learned to regulate their own body. They learned how to sense danger before they learned how to feel safe. They were not born fragile. They were trained to be vigilant. When you grow up in an environment where love is inconsistent, moods are unpredictable, or safety depends on other people's emotions, your nervous system adapts. You become hyper-attuned. You become emotionally literate. You become socially intelligent. You become exquisitely aware. You learn what silence means. You learn what tension means. You learn what tone means. You learn what withdrawal means. You learn what disappointment sounds like before it becomes anger. And eventually, you learn how to shape yourself to prevent harm. This is where the empath identity is born. Not from magic, not from mysticism, from adaptation. Your nervous system learned how to survive. But here is the part no one tells you. The same sensitivity that once kept you safe becomes the very thing that traps you later. You start confusing awareness with responsibility. You start confusing empathy with obligation. You start confusing love with self-sacrifice. You do not just notice pain. You carry it. You do not just feel emotions. You manage them. You do not just witness suffering. You absorb it. And slowly, quietly, invisibly, you disappear. You become the emotional backbone of everyone around you while starving yourself of support. That is not kindness. That is conditioning. So what happens when the empath breaks? They stop betraying themselves. The moment that breaks most empaths is not dramatic. It is not explosive. It is not loud. It is the moment they realize they are exhausted, not tired, not burned out, exhausted at the soul level. It is the moment they realize they have been giving more than they have been receiving for years. It is the moment they realize that no one ever really asks how they are doing. It is the moment they realize they have been carrying everyone else's emotions while no one has been holding theirs. That is when the identity fractures. That is when the nervous system says no more. That is when the empath stops being available for emotional extraction. And that is when people start to say you changed. They say you are cold. They say you are distant. They say you are selfish. They say you are not the same anymore. But what they are really saying is this: you stop making their comfort your responsibility. A broken empath is not someone who became bitter. They became sovereign. They no longer confuse love with labor. They no longer confuse care with collapse. They no longer confuse compassion with compliance. They still feel deeply, but they do not drown in other people's emotions anymore. They still care, but they do not carry what is not theirs. They still connect, but they do not abandon themselves to do it. This is the most misunderstood transformation in emotional psychology, because when a sensitive nervous system heals, it does not become numb, it becomes powerful. A healed empath is not soft in the way people think. They are precise. They are perceptive. They are emotionally intelligent. They are impossible to manipulate. They see patterns others miss. They feel undercurrents others ignore. They detect incongruence instantly, but now they trust themselves. And that is what makes them dangerous to underestimate. Here is the part most people never see coming. The broken empath becomes the person who can sit in discomfort without collapsing. They can hold space without losing themselves. They can hear hard truths without spiraling. They can set boundaries without guilt. They can walk away without explaining. Because they no longer operate from fear of abandonment. They operate from self-respect. This is what emotional sovereignty looks like. Not control, not dominance, not hardness, stability. A regulated nervous system is the most powerful force in any room. It does not react. It responds. It does not chase. It chooses. It does not beg. It invites. And people feel that. They feel your grounded presence. They feel your clarity. They feel your certainty. They may not understand it, but they respect it. Because for the first time in your life, you are not seeking safety from others. You are generating it from within. Now, here is the action step I promised you. This is the shift that moves you from emotional absorption into emotional authority. The next time you feel yourself absorbing someone else's emotional state, pause and ask yourself one question. Is this mine to carry? Not can I handle it? Not should I help? Not would they fall apart without me? Is this mine? Then place one hand on your chest and one on your stomach and slow your breathing until your exhale is longer than your inhale. This tells your nervous system you are safe. This returns you to your body. This brings you back into self-ownership. You are not here to regulate other people's emotions. You are here to live. This is the identity shift. You are not a broken empath. You are a recalibrated one. You are not too sensitive. You are finely tuned. You are not fragile. You are resilient. You are not weak. You are regulated. And once a sensitive person learns how to stand inside themselves instead of around everyone else, they become the last person anyone should ever underestimate, because they have already survived the emotional battlefield. And now they are finally fighting for themselves. This is your new identity. You are not here to be consumed. You are here to be sovereign. You are here to be grounded. You are here to be powerful. You are the empath who learned how to lead with their nervous system instead of sacrificing it. And once you step into that self, you do not go back. You rise. And now we go deeper, because what you just heard is the part that feels empowering. But the real transformation for a sensitive person is not just learning to say no. It is learning to notice what happens inside you when you do. Because most people do not realize this. The hardest part of healing for an empath is not setting the boundary. The hardest part is tolerating the internal panic that comes after. That panic is not intuition. That panic is not a sign you did the wrong thing. That panic is your nervous system re-experiencing an old fear in a new moment. Here is what a lot of sensitive people do. They set a boundary, and then they immediately try to soften it. They explain it for 10 minutes. They send another message to make sure the other person is okay. They over-justify, over-clarify, over-caretake, not because they are weak, because their nervous system learned a long time ago that boundaries lead to punishment. That is not drama. That is conditioning. So if you want to become the empath nobody underestimates, you need to understand the 3 hidden patterns that keep empaths stuck in emotional servitude. Not because you are broken, because your body learned a strategy, and what is learned can be unlearned. The first pattern is emotional prepayment. This is when you give more than is asked for, not because you want to, but because you are trying to buy safety. You do it with attention, you do it with reassurance, you do it with generosity, you do it with emotional labor. You sense someone pulling away and you increase your effort. You sense someone is irritated and you become extra accommodating. You sense uncertainty and you try to be perfect. A sensitive nervous system learns to do this because in childhood, love might have required performance. If the adults around you were overwhelmed, emotionally immature, unpredictable, or easily triggered, you learned that being easy was safer than being real. So you became the person who anticipates. You learned to read needs before they were spoken. You learned to take responsibility before anyone asked. You learned to apologize before anyone accused. And the world rewards this at first. People call you kind. People call you thoughtful. People call you mature for your age. People say they feel safe with you. But what they often mean is they feel comfortable with you because you make it easy for them to avoid their own emotional responsibility. This is where the empath gets underestimated because they look like they will always bend. They look like they will always understand. They look like they will always forgive. They look like they will always come back until they do not. The second pattern is emotional merging. This is when your sense of self dissolves in other people's emotions. You walk into a room and you feel tense. You talk to someone and your mood shifts. You spend time with an anxious person and suddenly you are anxious. And you assume it is empathy. Sometimes it is. But often it is a nervous system that has not learned boundaries at the level of the body. This is important. Boundaries are not just words. They are physiology. A nervous system that grew up around emotional volatility often becomes porous. It learns to stay externally focused. It learns to scan faces, tones, and moods to predict what is coming next. And because you got good at it, you started to build your identity around it. I can feel what people feel. I can sense energy. I know when something is off. That may be partially true, but here is the hard truth, delivered with compassion. If you are always scanning the room, you are not fully in your body. You are not present. You are monitoring. That is not a moral failure. That is a survival adaptation. But it has a cost. When you live in constant attunement to others, you lose attunement to yourself. You stop knowing what you want until someone else wants something. You stop knowing how you feel until someone else feels something. You stop knowing what you need until you are already depleted. This is why so many empaths struggle with decision making. Not because they are indecisive, because they have been trained to prioritize external information over internal truth. The third pattern is emotional overfunctioning. This is the pattern that looks like love but feels like exhaustion. It is when you do for people what they could do for themselves. You regulate for them. You interpret for them. You forgive for them. You carry consequences for them. You become the translator of everyone's feelings. You soften reality so they can swallow it. You hold everyone's pain so they do not have to face it. And you call it compassion. But over time, the truth becomes impossible to ignore. You are not just being kind, you are trying to prevent rupture. Because rupture once meant danger. So you become the person who prevents conflict at all costs. You become the one who says, it is okay when it is not okay. You become the one who stays quiet because honesty feels risky. You become the one who swallows disappointment and calls it maturity. That is the unhealed empath. Not weak, not broken, over-adapted. Now, this is where things get uncomfortable, because this is the part that changes your whole identity. The empath that people underestimate is the empath who thinks their gift is feeling. The empath that nobody can underestimate is the empath who learns discernment. Discernment is not coldness. Discernment is the ability to feel deeply without surrendering your center. It is the ability to care without carrying. It is the ability to be open without being available for extraction. And this is why healing can feel like you are becoming someone else. Because you are. You are becoming the version of you that no longer needs to earn safety. You are becoming the version of you that trusts your own body. You are becoming the version of you that can tolerate someone being disappointed in you without trying to fix it. That is emotional adulthood. And it is rare. Here is something most people never understand about sensitive people. A sensitive person who has been betrayed by themselves is easy to manipulate. A sensitive person who has returned to themselves is impossible to control. Because manipulation depends on one thing: your reflex to abandon yourself. People only get power over you when you are willing to override your own truth to keep connection. That is why certain dynamics repeat. You end up with people who take too much. You end up with people who need you to manage their emotions. You end up with people who benefit from your softness and resent your boundaries. Not because you attract monsters, because you were trained to confuse intensity with intimacy. You are trained to confuse being needed with being loved, and the world can feel it. When you are running the old program, you broadcast it without speaking. You broadcast, I will adjust. You broadcast, I will carry. You broadcast, I will work harder if you pull away. That is the frequency that draws emotional consumers. So when you start healing, the first sign is not peace. The first sign is friction. You say no, and your stomach tightens. You disappoint someone, and your chest feels heavy. You stop rescuing, and your mind starts generating worst-case outcomes. This is where most empaths turn back. Not because the boundary was wrong, because the discomfort feels like danger. But that discomfort is actually your nervous system expanding its window of tolerance. It is learning to stay with your truth while your body remembers old consequences. This is the part where you need a different definition of strength. Strength is not never feeling fear. Strength is feeling fear and still staying inside yourself. Now I want to name something that might land sharply, but it will set you free if you can hear it. A lot of what people call empathy is fear wearing a beautiful outfit, fear of being disliked, fear of being abandoned, fear of being the problem, fear of conflict, fear of being seen as selfish. And because you are a good person, you wrap that fear in morality. I am just being understanding. I am just being compassionate. I do not want to hurt anyone. But underneath, your body is saying something else. Please do not leave. Please do not get angry. Please do not punish me. That is not shameful. That is human. And it is the exact moment where the broken empath becomes powerful. Because the day you see this clearly, you stop moralizing your self-abandonment. You stop calling it kindness. You call it what it is. A survival strategy that you no longer need. This is what healing looks like in real time. You notice the impulse to over-explain, and you do not follow it. You notice the urge to fix someone's mood, and you let them have their mood. You notice the discomfort of silence, and you stay present. You notice guilt rise when you choose yourself, and you do not confuse guilt with wrongdoing. That guilt is often grief. Grief for the version of you that only felt safe when you were useful. Let that hit. A lot of sensitive people are not afraid of boundaries. They are afraid of the identity loss that comes with them. Because if you are not the one who understands everyone, who are you? If you are not the one who carries the emotional weight, what is your role? If you are not the one who saves, what is your value? This is where people panic, not because they do not know how to set boundaries, because they do not know who they will be afterward. So let us make this practical, not motivational, practical. Here is a simple way to spot when you are about to slip back into the old empath identity. You will feel one of these sensations: a tightening in your throat, like words are not allowed to come out; a buzzing in your chest, like urgency; a heaviness in your stomach, like you are responsible; a pressure in your face, like you need to smile. That is not random. That is your nervous system initiating a survival response. For many sensitive people, the default is fawn. Fawn is the trauma response that says, I will keep you happy so I stay safe. It looks like helpfulness. It looks like sweetness. It looks like being the bigger person. It looks like being low maintenance. But inside, it is self-erasure. And if that is you, I want you to hear this carefully. Your empathy did not make you weak. Your lack of boundaries did not make you good. It made you available to the wrong people. Now the shift, when you feel that old fawn response come online, do not rush to fix it with more thinking. Thinking is not the first step. Regulation is. Here is a second action step, and it is small enough to do in real time. It is called name, anchor, choose. Name. Silently label what is happening in your body. My chest is tight. My stomach is dropping. My throat feels blocked. Anchor. Bring yourself back into the present with sensation. Press your feet into the floor. Feel your toes inside your shoes. Notice the support under you. Choose. Decide your next sentence from your adult self, not your survival self. That last part matters. Your adult self speaks slower. Your survival self rushes. Your adult self is direct. Your survival self performs. Your adult self can tolerate discomfort. Your survival self tries to eliminate it. This is how a broken empath becomes someone people fear too late. Not because they become cruel, because they stop being negotiable. And when a person stops being negotiable, they stop being controllable. People underestimate you when they think your softness means access. They think because you feel deeply, you will always forgive. They think because you are considerate, you will always accommodate. They think because you are calm, you will never leave. But a healed empath is calm because they are anchored, not because they are tolerating. They are quiet because they are clear, not because they are afraid. They are kind because they choose kindness, not because they are trying to earn safety. That distinction changes everything. Now, let us talk about the part nobody prepares you for. When you stop being emotionally available for extraction, some people will escalate. They will test you. They will push harder. They will guilt you. They will call you selfish. They will suddenly have emergencies that require your immediate attention. They will rewrite history and act confused about why you are changing. This is not because you are doing something wrong. It is because the relationship was built on a role. Your role was emotional provider. When you stop providing, the system destabilizes. This is where the broken empath becomes the last person to underestimate, because most people expect you to fold. They expect you to feel bad and come back to the old position. But healing means this: you can feel bad and still not return. You can feel guilty and still be right. You can miss someone and still choose distance. You can love someone and still not be available to be drained. This is emotional maturity, and it is what makes your presence powerful. Because the moment you learn this, you stop being controlled by emotional pressure. Pressure used to work because your nervous system associated other people's discomfort with danger. Now you start seeing it differently. Their discomfort is not your emergency. Their disappointment is not your punishment. Their emotions are information, not commands. And when you live from that place, your whole energy changes. You walk into rooms differently. You stop scanning for approval. You stop searching faces for cues. You stop preloading your personality to match what will be accepted. You arrive as yourself, grounded, clear, contained. And some people will not like it, not because you became worse, because you became free. That is the real reason the broken empath is powerful. They stop participating in dynamics that depend on their self-abandonment. And in a world full of people who want access without accountability, that is disruptive. In a moment, I am going to show you the final stage of this transformation, the stage that turns your sensitivity into something almost sacred, not the ability to feel everything, but the ability to feel the truth. And I am going to name the identity that replaces empath when you are no longer surviving. Because there is a reason your healing scares certain people. It exposes the places where they relied on you to carry what they refused to hold. And once you see that clearly, you stop negotiating with your own worth.